So that's the fun part. Okay, so we are still at the first part now. Okay, bionomics is actually, so let us just go through the learning outcomes first. Okay, so what actually you are expected to learn by the end of this lesson is first to understand biomass production. Okay, biomass can be many different things. It can be plants, it can be your microbes, it can be algae. Okay, all of that we can say that it is biomass. And then the second learning outcome and the third actually is quite related. Okay, but basically it's about the genetic and environmental potential, okay, and challenges in the natural system. So you might ask me, like, what is the relationship of that? And why does the topic is called bionomics? What does it mean? Okay, now I ask you again. I ask that back to you. Do you guys know what is bionomics? Like, do you have like an idea? Maybe you have heard about it, never heard about it, that's fine. You can just share in the chat box as well if you are, your mic's not working or anything. Yeah, I did. Okay, I see people like, no, that's fine, no worry. Okay, that is the why we are learning, right? So never heard about it. Okay, first time heard this term. All right, that's fine, you guys, because you are here to learn. Okay, and actually, to tell you the truth, I have only heard about bionomics quite recently myself. So it's not a very sexy term. So people don't just, people have never heard about it. That's normal. Okay, because if we see, okay, let me just go quickly here. If you just look at the term itself, okay, bionomics, we have this in Greek. So bio means life. That is, it's very general. Okay, nomos actually means law. Okay, so the law of life. What is that? Okay, all right. So basically, it's the comprehensive study of an organism and its relation to its environment. Okay, so you might ask me, macam this is like biology. It can be that, or you might ask me ecology. Okay, ecology is actually almost similar. If you look up the definition of ecology, they tell you the same thing. Okay, the study of an organism and its relation to its environment. And what happened is that all this while, people have been equating this. So they say that bionomics is similar to ecology. Okay, that's why you heard the term ecology more, because that is the more popular term. Okay, that's what has been happening for the past, I think because the first term of the bionomics started in 80 something, 84 or something. So for the past 3 to 4 decades, people has been saying, okay, bionomics is ecology. So that's why they don't use bionomics, right? However, now, okay, people are starting to look at this a different way. Okay, they are saying, okay, now there are two major definitions. Okay, one is related to economy, so it's more of an economy term. Okay, and the other is the same like the biological term. So when we talk about economy, okay, as an economic discipline which studies economy as a self-organized, evolving ecosystem. Okay. Don't worry if you don't understand yet. Okay, we are going to look at that later on. But our focus is more towards this one as a biological discipline which studies the economic species. The living organisms having economic nature, the relations between them and relations between them and their environment. Okay, so always bear in mind, bionomics is actually something that relates the living system, okay, whatever that is living, with its environment. Okay, so that is the gist of the second definition there, right? And you will see later on why it is also applicable to this one. Why is it applicable even to economy, right? So first things first, you see what is in front of you. It's food, isn't it? You see a lot of different fruits, there's meat, there's fish, oil, everything. Okay, so where does all this come from? Just very simple lah. Where do this come from actually? Come on guys, where does the milk come from?
The milk come from the cow.
Huh? Sorry?
The milk come from the cow.
Sorry, yeah. I have to. Okay, now I maximize my mic. Hopefully I can hear you. Okay, from bioresource, from nature, from living organism. Okay, that's great. Of course, so it comes from your resources, what is around you. Okay, from the animals, okay, from the farms, right? And even things like fish, it comes from your, the natural resources is whatever is around you, okay? And you have your oceans, you have your rivers. Those things come from that, right? So we look at this in a very holistic way. We look at it in terms of the world now. Okay, so just bearing in mind, okay, where the food come from, it's from the resources around you. Okay, and if you just look at the global land use, basically, Earth's surface, there's 29% of land. Okay, but if you look at that, agriculture is actually only 50% from the whole of the land or surface. And from there is where, people are using the land to produce all the food for the rest of the population. Okay, we don't look at this in terms of country, we look at it in a term of the world. Okay, so you can see that, okay, there's only so many land, okay, and even that land, 50% of that is used for agriculture, basically to feed the people of the world. Okay, and see here now, the world population. Okay, world population keeps on going up. It's going up and up and up. However, our land, our resources is still the same. Okay, so I don't know if you guys know about the food security. Okay, that is a very, very big issue nowadays. Okay, food security. So this is not saying things like, oh, people are going to steal your food, not that, okay, not that security, but it's more of the supply of food, okay, towards the population. Okay, we are having this severe problem because exactly this, our population is increasing, but we don't have enough resources. Okay, that is that, the problem there actually. Okay, which is why this one is very, very important, and people like you guys are needed, okay, to help the country, okay, help the world. How are we going to solve this? So this is just talking about food, okay? And then that is about food. However, with the increasing of population, we see this trend elsewhere. Okay, you see in Tenaga Nasional, okay, this is a Semenanjung thing, okay, Tenaga, because you guys in Sarawak, you have Sarawak Energy, etc., right, for the electricity. Okay, but basically the trend is similar. So you have the population increasing, so people will start to use more power. Okay, you have more houses, you have more appliances, people definitely use more power. So if you add all of that, you look at that in terms of country and in terms of the world, the pattern is always going to go up. And you see water as well. Okay, more people have access to water, then the consumption is going up. Everywhere is going up. Okay, this is tourist, maybe not too relevant. However, you know, if just look at Malaysia, if we have more tourists, then more people are going to use the resources that we have. Okay. Not saying that's a bad thing, because that actually supports the economy. Okay, but just telling you this in terms of what are the demands. Okay, the population demands is increasing. All right, sorry for that. Now, again, we see this one in terms of fish. I don't know in Sarawak. Okay, I've never been in Bintulu actually, but I've been to Kuching a few times. I've been to Sibu once, I think. And you know, in Sabah and Sarawak, I always love the seafood. There's so many seafood. The seafood is very cheap as well. Here it's so expensive. Okay. However, the trend, if you look at the world trend, okay, fish stock, okay, it's going down. However, you know, okay, first is, of course, the population is increasing. At the same time, the fishermen, okay, we have actually more fishermen going to the seas, okay, to capture the fish, right? Why don't we get more fish? Because we have like more fishermen and we have better boats. You know, you have the very big fishing boats have things like radar, for example, and they can actually see where the school of fish are, so they can actually target that area, okay, things like that, right? Why do you think we don't get more fish? We have better technology, we have more people going out and, you know, start fishing, but the trend of fish is actually going down. Do you guys have any idea why? Tempura. Yeah, just look at the chat box as well. Most expensive fish can be found in Kapit and Belaga. Okay. Oh, fish price in Bintulu is also expensive. Yeah, I heard that the cost of living in Bintulu is quite high as well. I don't know if that's true. Okay, right. Empurau. Empurau is that very expensive fish, right? Never tried that. Ikan Jos. What is Ikan Jos? The one, the movie, Shark, is it? Ikan Jos is something else. Jerung, salmon. Okay. Ikan siakap. Ikan siakap 1,000, 2,000 Okay. So the point here is that actually the answer is here, decline in fish stock. We have declining, sorry about that. Okay, actually the reason why people can get more fish, okay, is because that is the decline in fish stock. Okay, we have that problem, which is why even with more fishermen, even with better technology, better boats, you don't really get to fish more than you expected. Okay, and of course, this is in Malaysia. Okay, this is a 93% decline, but the trend is similar, not only in Malaysia, but across the world. So it's a very big problem, basically. Okay, coming back to what I mentioned earlier about food security. So this is one of the major problems that we have, right? So relating that, okay, relating that to, let me just try and have, okay, that's fine. What I'm trying to say is that if we just look at an organism, okay, how they are living, okay, the major aim of an organism is always to reproduce. Yeah, I hope that is you guys already know that. Okay, we are looking at the smallest thing up even to us. Okay, the sustainability, our survival, that is the major thing basically for all living things, right? So if we just look at the smallest type of things, the microorganism, bacteria, okay, you see how it grows. Okay, of course, cell division, but at the end of the day, you have more. Okay, the population is increasing. Okay, the biomass as a whole becomes higher, it becomes smaller. More biomass, you get more biomass after a certain period of time, which is what you see down here. Okay, if you have culture, you guys do things like this, right, in the labs? Do you guys culture microorganisms, etc.? Yeah, ada kan? Okay, right. So what we do is usually now we have the liquid culture and then we put in the inoculum. Okay, so basically, I'm not sure with you guys, but the usual protocol is we add like 10% inoculum of the volume. So you have something like 100 volume of the liquid culture, then you add 10% to make it 100. Okay. But at the end of the day, you see things started getting murky, right? This, sorry. Okay. It's a little bit weird, but just bear with me. So imagine if this is day 1. So look at the culture there. It's clear, means there's nothing. So maybe this is day 2 or day 3. And you see there's a lot of, you can just infer from that image that there's a lot of bacteria there. Yeah, when you see things like this. Okay? Because basically what's happened is exactly this one lah. So it start to divide, it start to repopulate the space. Okay, and in day, let's say, just put the day there, day 7. It becomes like this. Okay, what happened there? Okay, so it depends. It can be that it entered the death phase. Okay, there's so many reasons, but it's the natural progression, we can say. Okay, from here to there. Right? So why is that relevant? Okay, if we think about population size just now, okay, and usually we say, okay, growth of something like population here can be anything. Of course, we say population doesn't only mean people. Okay, it also refers to if you're working on bacteria, then it becomes the population size of your bacteria. Okay, if it's yeast, if it's algae, so it's referring to that. So just highlighting that. Okay, in case you are saying, oh, population is only for people. Whoops. Okay. So if you just look at that, yeah, population size, and we infer from the previous image. Okay, does this happen? Does it keep on going up to infinity? As long as you give them time, it's going to keep on growing. Okay, does that happen in real life?
No.
No. Okay, do you have any idea why?
Why? Because I think the bioresources requires a long period of time, so maybe 100 years and above to regenerate, and the bioresources are limited.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Okay, soon, right? So thank you for the answer. You highlighted a very good point there. okay, limitation. So the resources are limited. So usually what we see is something like this. Okay, so ignore the name first. We just look at the graph. Okay, so it doesn't happen like this. Yeah, it doesn't keep on growing and growing and growing. Okay, usually it's like this. Right? You always have something like a period where the population grows, and then it comes to a time or to a size big enough that it cannot grow any further. Okay, and there is a reason for that. And you highlighted exactly the thing. There are limitations. Okay, so imagine us when we are living, yeah, and we have very limited food. Okay, let's say during COVID, okay, and you are not in contact with the outside world. You are limited by whatever that you have around you. Okay, that is one example, but the better example would be the bacteria just now. Why does it happen like this? Why does it die at the day 7? It's because at the end of the day, after the resources had already been used up, there's no more food. There's no more food for the bacteria, so it cannot survive anymore. Okay, and which is why things here, if you look at logistic growth here, so basically there are many models used to describe growth. Okay, so logistic model here is one of the examples. Okay, there are others. So if you look up biomass production, you may find other models that describe this. Okay, but I'm just showing you logistic because, of course, one is I've worked with logistic models, okay, and it does work. Secondly, is that I want to show you this graph. Okay, so usually what happens, okay, just relate back to what we do in the lab. Okay, we have I really cannot draw on. I have actually a tablet, but I can't draw on that. Very sorry about that. So imagine this is your cone. This is your culture. Okay, and you add your media. Okay, and then you add your. Hi, Dr. Hanisa.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
It's okay, don't worry.
I saw your drawing, so it's
It's really bad. Okay, don't worry. So we have we put in our media and we put in our inoculum. Okay, so inoculum just now is we just, let's say, 10%, okay, of the whole thing. So you don't usually put the whole of your inoculum into your media. Usually you just put 10%. Okay. So what happened there is the bacteria, it comes into some new environment. Okay, before this it was together with all the bacteria friends. Okay, now you put it into this one cone. Okay, and turns out, oh, there's so many food here. Okay, imagine your media, your nutrient media usually contains a lot of nutrients, right? So that bacteria suddenly found out, oh, okay, there's a lot of things here, okay, and there's not many people around. Okay, imagine here, it's so, the population is low, right? So it can start growing. Okay, it grows, 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 grows. Okay, and here is usually we say the exponential growth. It's where it is, the growth rate is the highest. Okay, and then comes to a point, okay, suddenly here, okay, the population is a lot, there's a lot of bacteria in there. Okay, but the food now, the nutrients are less, okay, because it has been used up before. Okay, So it started, it's still producing, it's still reproducing. However, it becomes lower up to a point where it comes to a stationary growth. Okay, and what happened here is because the nutrients has already been used up. Okay, there's no more nutrients anymore. So the bacteria itself is starting to slow down. Okay, it cannot reproduce anymore. Okay, and at the end, it will go down because it dies off. Right? So that is the basic what is happening basically from the perspective of the culturing process. Okay? But if you think about it, it is similar. If you apply this concept, okay, with other populations as well. If we talk about fish, if we talk about plants, okay, if you grow crops, for example, okay, crops, let's say palm oil. Okay. There's only so many resources you can use before it comes to a point where you cannot grow anymore. Okay, and that is actually the link with the economic definition of bionomics just now. Okay, in economy, you are looking at things like businesses, and businesses cannot grow beyond what is available to them. Okay, if they use all the resources that they have, they cannot grow anymore unless they change They change their environment, so on and so forth. Okay, but don't worry too much about the economic side. I just want to relate that. Okay, and if you look back before with the definitions, then you can actually start thinking about that. Okay, in terms of how economy changes with the environment. Okay, so in logistic model, yes, the population expansion decreases as resources become scarce. Okay, exactly what we looked before. Okay, the not only the nutrients, there's also other things as well that will affect the growth of something. Okay, and if we talk about bacteria, yes, other than nutrients, there's also things like temperature, pH. There are many different things that affect the growth of a bacteria. Okay, and that is also similar to things like fungi, things like algae. Everything is affected by their environment. Okay, if you imagine the bacteria, the algae in a specific environment, okay, in the lab it's different because we can actually control. Okay, we can, if it reaches a point, okay, if it's you guys are looking at bioindustry, you are producing something from the bacteria, okay, you would definitely want the bacteria to keep on producing something. Okay, that is your goal. Okay, and because of that, you will keep on giving them the nutrients, for example, okay, to extend their lifetime. That is one way to do it. Secondly, is you may change the environment of it. So you may change the temperature, the pH, okay, whatever is affecting the growth and the production of your target products, right? You will manipulate that. Okay, we are talking about in terms of application now. Okay, not only on very small scale. Okay, this is in larger scale. Right? So the highlight or the conclusion there that I want to point out is this one. The growth of an organism is affected by its surrounding. Okay, and surrounding means so many different things. Okay, it can be nutrients. Okay, maybe it can be specific nutrients. Right? It can be temperature. It can be light, it can be pH. Yeah, so I hope that is clear. Right? And I just, because my background, or rather my expertise is on microalgae, I just want to share with you about microalgae. Okay, I don't know if any of you had ever learned about microalgae or
No, we
no?
haven't learned before.
Okay, that's good. So it's a good way to introduce to you. Okay, but we'll just go very quickly. But I just want to highlight one of the relationship of the microorganisms with the environment. Okay, so I'm going to share what I have done previously. Okay, so if you just look at microalgae, okay, it's like bacteria. It's simple. It's a simple organism. However, here it says autotrophic. Oh my gosh. Autotrophic. Okay, anyone knows what is autotrophic?
Basically, plant, maybe or living organisms which can produce their own through synthesis of chemical or biological processes inside the leaf itself.
Okay, right. That's a very good definition of autotroph. But the layman explanation would be this organism actually produces their own food. Okay, that's the simple explanation for autotrophic. Okay, and if you have something like photoautotroph, okay, it means that the energy used to produce that biomass or the carbon skeleton comes from light. Okay, that's the easiest way to look at that. So autotroph means that it produces its own. Okay, and photo actually is where the energy comes from. Okay, because even when we talk about autotroph, yes, they produce the carbon by themselves, but the energy to do that must come from somewhere. Okay, and here it comes from photo, which is light. There's also chemoautotroph. Okay, chemo, it relates to chemical, right? Chemochemical. So it comes actually from organic materials. Okay, so that's the easy way to look at that. Okay. So why exactly algae? What I just want to highlight, right? Is because algae, it's like plants. Okay, it does photosynthesis. Okay, because it's an autotrophic organism. Okay, similar to plants, it undergoes photosynthesis. However, it has a higher growth rate. Okay, so if you compare algae with the plant next to it, okay, plant would maybe need like a few years to produce, finally you get the product from that. However, with algae, because of the high growth rates, it's so much faster. You can get things in days instead of months. Okay, that's how why it is quite relevant, right? And you can utilize many types of water, produces valuable byproducts, and amenable to genetic transformation. So basically, actually from algae, there's a lot that you get. The current products that you have in the market, a lot of them has algae in them. Okay, you just may not know that. One of the easiest thing is, I don't know, do you like Korean food?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I love Korean food myself. So the seaweed, okay, the one when you use kimbap, for example, or the one that you wrap up the rice, kimbap, the seaweed there is actually algae. So it's macroalgae lah. So it's not actually micro, but it's basically algae. Okay, and there's a lot of for baby formula. Okay, maybe this is not the right crowd to talk about that, but if you have a younger sister or brother who are still taking milk formula, okay, the DHA and AHA component in that milk formula actually comes from microalgae. Okay, and a lot of cosmetics, they use some components from microalgae. So there's a lot of different products that you can get actually from these tiny creatures, right? So my highlight here is here, okay? So ignore the biofuel production because that is what I do, okay? But affect the growth rate. So it can be the strain, okay? Just similar to bacteria, the different species may produce different products, okay? And also may react differently to different environmental factors. Okay? So like for algae in particular, remember because it performs photosynthesis, so it needs light. Okay, so light is a very big thing with algae, right? And if you think back about photosynthesis, right? What is it actually? So photosynthesis is it fixes CO2, okay, and it produces oxygen and water. That's usually how people look at photosynthesis. But what actually happens is that the carbon dioxide, okay, from the surrounding. Okay, so algae, similar to trees, okay, it the carbon dioxide that is around it, okay, will come into the cell, okay, and that is fixed into glucose. Okay, so glucose is the basic building block. Okay, I hope you guys had learned biochemistry, maybe, I'm not sure. Do you guys have biochemistry subject in the program?
Currently now we have no such subjects related to biochemistry.
Okay, but you guys, I think have the.
Dr. Yvina, it will be soon, next semester.
Oh, will be soon. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So this is like a crash course. That's okay. Just giving you, yeah, just giving you the introduction. Okay. Usually, if we talk about biochemistry, so don't stress out. Okay. That's not. It's basically when you talk about all these pathways. Okay. Sorry, I had to translate. Like, there's a lag to translate specific words. Okay, there's pathways, okay, that basically governs how a microorganism actually works for the lack of better term. Okay, so inside different species of microorganisms, okay, there are different pathways. Okay, and that pathways actually tells the cells, okay, what to produce, what you can actually use as your carbon, okay, things like that. But don't worry, we will go very basic. Okay, just look at the photosynthesis just now. So this is the basic explanation of photosynthesis. Okay, that's why people say, okay, go and plant trees. Okay, because we have the problem of carbon right now. Okay, carbon emission is a very big, problem. Okay, I hope you guys know about greenhouse gases.
Yes.
Okay, all right, okay. And the relationship between greenhouse gases and climate change. Okay, so basically, C here is a very big problem. Okay, and it's all around us. We breathe in oxygen, we give out CO2. Okay, but our concentration of CO2 is not that high. But imagine like very big industries, very big factories, okay, where they actually emit a lot of carbon, okay, CO2 lah. So that is leading to the increase of GHG in the atmosphere, and that leads to climate change, right? So we look at this in a very holistic way. Everything is connected, right? So that's why people say plant more trees, because we want to reduce the carbon concentration in our atmosphere. Okay, because plants do photosynthesis and algae also do the same thing. Okay, so you have, it fixes the CO2 from the environment, and it actually produces glucose. Okay, so glucose is the major building blocks in microorganisms. And the difference between algae and bacteria is that, because usually in bacteria, okay, in whatever system or whatever products that you are producing, okay, you will need to supply the carbon source. Okay, that's why in your media, okay, remember, if you have your liquid media and your bacteria, you add them together, there must be some carbon source in your media. Because why? Bacteria must have that carbon. It must have that carbon source. Okay, and that will help them to grow, okay, and to produce more stuff. Okay, what exactly that you are targeting? Okay, it can be specific food. It can be things like, there's so many things that we can produce actually from bacteria and from microorganisms. Okay, so that's where the difference is. So when we talk about algae, it's that lah. It fixes CO2 into glucose, and then only then will it start to produce whatever that you want to produce. So it's a longer process compared to bacteria. Yeah. However, you don't need to give them, the carbon source, because they can actually get that from their environment. So when we relate that to what we have talked before about, your environment, how it affects that specific microorganisms, okay, there you can already gather. Okay, so from algae, light is definitely one of the biggest thing, okay, because it needs the light energy to do this actually. Okay, and here CO2. CO2 is also something that might limit. What if they don't have access to CO2? They won't be able to do this. Okay, and without that, they won't be able to grow. Okay, so that is basically the limits of the natural system. If we have a system, okay, system here refers to things like bacteria, or even plants, terrestrial plants. It can be fungi. It can be anything. Okay, so the limits there comes from your knowledge about what they need to survive. Okay, if they need light, then that would definitely be something that may limit their growth. Okay, so of course, apart from this, with microorganisms, we know that they also need other types of nutrients. Okay, we have macronutrients, we have micronutrients, things that they need to survive. So that becomes also a limiting factor. Okay, so for example, okay, usually these type of limitations are why people are doing genetic manipulation. Okay, so I hope that is you can get the gist of that, because we know that there are these limitations. Okay, and I mentioned to you about the pathways here. Okay, these pathways actually, they have like what they need, basically to start off the process. Okay, so when you go very specific, right, in your, later on, not for this class, of course, but later on when you start studying in depth, or you are doing your thesis, for example, okay, you're doing your dissertation, you are going to study more about these things. Okay, so bear in mind, whatever that you grow, okay, will be affected by its environment. And by saying environment, there are, of course, obvious things like this, like CO2, like for algae, of course, but you guys, I think, won't be doing algae, I think, more on bacteria and plants. So I'm not sure, I think so, okay. But so that's where this one comes into play. So the carbon source, okay, the air, the agitation, those are the things that will affect the growth of the natural system. However, we know that there are some things that you can actually change. Okay, and that gives rise to things like genetic manipulation. Okay, just giving you an example, because this is actually an algae cell. Okay, and you see light here, and photosynthesis happens in the chloroplast. Okay, so I think you guys had learned about photosynthesis in high school, maybe. Okay, so just a crash course, just a refresher lah, right? So the light hits the chloroplast, okay, and photosynthesis actually happens there. But if you look further in photosynthesis, there's actually two stages, okay? And these stages, basically each of the stage use different wavelengths of light. I don't know if that makes sense to you. Okay, so if you look at light, how does it become rainbow sometimes? Okay, if you just think about that, actually in light there are many different wavelengths. Okay, that is why when the condition allows it, you can see the rainbow with 7 colors. Okay, so the two photosystems that I mentioned before in photosynthesis, okay, let's say phase 1 and phase 2. Okay, each of these phases corresponds to different wavelengths of light. Okay, so you see, I'm just saying that this is in chloroplast, but actually there is a physical property inside algae called antenna. Okay, so relate that to here. Okay, just imagine in the algae, okay, in the cell, if it's a single cell, there is an antenna, okay, and that antenna is actually the one who captures the light. Okay, and then the light goes to your to the chloroplast here, the green thing. Okay, so pay attention to the antenna, okay, because different species here has different, which I mentioned before, the wavelength. Okay, the different wavelengths. Okay, this is the wavelength of light. Okay, and different algae, okay, and different, here you can see plants as well. It uses actually the different wavelengths of light. Okay, so what happens is that sometimes the antenna is very it's very good at its job. Okay, it captures a lot of light, but the system here, the cell itself, cannot process that light fast enough. Okay, because the antenna is very, very effective. It captures too much light, so it actually heats up the cell. That's where it becomes, light becomes a limiting factor, and even some of the algae dies because of this. Because what happens when it's overexposed to light, okay, light, it's hot, right? Yeah, it's something that we all know. You go out to the sun, you feel hot. It's basically what happens there. So the light hits there, it cannot be processed, it cannot be turned into glucose fast enough. So that light energy turns into heat inside the cell. Okay, so when that happens, of course, the cell will be stressed out, okay, and eventually it will, some will die, some will grow smaller, okay, it becomes stressed. So what people do with genetic manipulation is that they change the antenna. Okay, they change the antenna to become, smaller, so it doesn't capture too much light too fast. Okay, there are many, many different strategies, but one of them is that. So it changes the size of the antenna. Okay, now that is one thing. That is if your aim is to improve the photosynthesis process. Okay, but how about if you are an agrotechnologist? Okay, and you are actually using algae to produce, like myself just now, I'm producing something for fragrance. Okay, so let me just relate that. So within the pathways, so the pathways to produce the fragrance is this one. So it's from Calvin cycle. Okay, it goes to acetyl-CoA and it goes to isoprenoids, right? But remember, like I said before, carbon is the building block. Glucose is the building block of anything. Okay, so in Calvin cycle, you will produce that. You will produce C6H12O6, which is your glucose. Okay, so if you look here, this circle, there's different paths that they can go, right? It can go here to starch, it can go here to acetyl-CoA. Okay, but if my interest was on here, what would I do here? Imagine there's two roads going, and you don't want the whatever that you have here to go that way. Okay, talking about biotechnologies and genetic manipulation. You knock off this gene, you knock off this one so that it doesn't produce starch. Okay, are you still with me? Okay, tak? Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
okay, so imagine here tadi, you have the glucose here within the Calvin cycle. Okay, just to reiterate. Okay, and you have, let's say, 10 glucose inside. Okay, okay, let me just, okay, imagine there's 10 glucose here. Okay, and there's two roads. There's two roads where the glucose can go. Okay, if you are someone who is interested in this product, you would want your all 10 glucose to go here. Okay, hope it makes sense. Because now it has two options now. That's why we use synthetic systems. We change the biology, we change the genetic, we do the genetic manipulation, we knock off this gene, okay, so it cannot produce starch anymore. So all of this will go to this root and produce your product. And that is also similar, okay, if actually you want this one, if you want starch, for example, starch is actually food, right? And you know, algae has been used before to produce for starch. Okay, so what they do is they knock off all the other genes that can be a competition for the glucose here. So eventually it only produces starch. Right? So that's how I just use the same system here. Of course, you guys may not be familiar with algae, but I hope you guys can get the gist, okay, how people think about changing the system, the natural system, because of the limitations. Okay, it has its potential. You know exactly from that particular bacteria, okay, it can produce something. But how you want to increase the production, that is the study of bionomics, right? You change the environment in a way that eventually you get more biomass, you get more products, right? Okay, I don't know why that is there, but that is me. So that was my algae before. Okay, and when I walk in, okay, it always smells good because I was producing fragrance here. Okay, it's very, very nice. So anyway, just sharing with you what other things that might relate to the changing of environment. Okay, so if you remember back just now when we talk about photosynthesis, okay, so usually in the lab, okay, you can have the option of having continuous light. So you just keep on, like here, you just keep on turning the light for 24 hours. Okay, that is possible when you do in the lab. But imagine if you have something like this outdoor, okay, you have something outside and you don't want to give any light, you are just depending on sunlight. Okay, so when you do that, of course, there's the light and dark cycle because there's the day and the night. Okay, the night definitely you won't get any light. So that is the basic of why this was done. So I was studying like, is there any differences between when I give constant light versus, light and dark cycle? Okay, because light and dark cycle here, you see 16 and 8. 16 is light, 8 is dark. So I stopped giving the culture light for 8 hours every day. Okay, and because we just want to know, okay, in lab, of course, you can always do that. You can always give constant light, but remember, light is power, and power equals to electricity bill. Okay, at the end of the day, when you do things in the lab and you are thinking of, scaling up, always have this, you have this thing in mind, what will happen if this is done in the industry? Okay, you always want to go for something less costly. Okay, you want to change, you want to make sure, you don't overburden. Okay, so that is the thinking behind that. So I give the one here, and you can actually see here, with the one with constant light, definitely the biomass is higher. So this axis, this one is actually the biomass lah. So I called it cell density, but it's actually biomass. Okay, and the biomass concentration is increasing. And if you compare here and here, okay, we see that somehow, okay lah, the constant light is higher, okay, because it almost reaches 20. This one is, okay, not too much, right? But still, you would say that that one performed better. However, when you really look at the product, okay, Back then, I was producing this one thing. So don't worry about that. This is almost similar to the fragrance thing just now, but it's a different product. Okay, but it's the same pathway. So you see the biomass actually for constant light is higher, but the product for the light and dark cycle is actually higher. Okay, so it's a little bit different than what you would expect. So with the constant light, you get a higher biomass, but you get lower product, right? Whereas for light and dark, it's lower biomass, but it's higher product. So there must be a reason when we talk about now in the topic of bionomics. Okay, you have to be very clear about what is your aim. Okay, later on when you are working with something, right? Whether you are focusing on the biomass, okay, you want to produce more things, more biomass, or you want to produce more products, because the environment or the bionomics around it may be different. So you have to look at that as well. Right? So it's not as simple cut as that. So sometimes people say, okay, just aim for more biomass, then you get more products. It's not always true. So that's where you guys have the challenge, okay? Later on when you do your dissertation, when you do your research, and I hope you guys will go into the job market, okay, and you are working on this. You know, we really need people on this one. Okay. In the industry, we have people in the university, of course, but people who are translating all of this to the industry, okay, where eventually the products can actually benefit people, that is very, very rare. Okay, we need a lot of industrialists, the bio-industrial people, okay, in the industry. Okay, so this one I'll just go very quickly. So this is basically previously that was on light and dark cycle. Okay, I also studied things like temperature. Okay, there's so many things that may affect. Okay, or sometimes it turns out you think it may affect, but it didn't. Okay, it all depends on what are the type of species you're using, etc. Okay, so on and so forth. So that is basically depending on specific species that you're using, okay, and what is your final aim later on. So just now you see carbon, now it's phosphorus, you know. So there's a lot of things actually. Okay, so far so good. Okay.
Yes,
What time is it?
clear.
Right, clear, good. Okay, so don't worry. Actually, for this class, I don't plan for 2 hours actually. Okay, I usually try, because I know that the attention span, yeah, for 2 hours usually is asking too much sometimes lah. I don't know about you guys, maybe you are very, very good at that. Even myself, for 2 hours, sometimes, you know, you are flat already. Okay, so anyway, so far so good, then that's good, right? So just going back, okay, I hope you guys are clear already on the differences between natural and synthetic system, okay, and why people manipulate certain genes. Okay, it all must be justified by something lah. Yeah, you want to produce more, you want to actually improve the productivity, so on and so forth, right? But saying that in terms of the larger scale, okay, if you look at agriculture, okay, this is where I just want to relate back to the economic part of bionomics. Okay, if you just remember back, so don't worry, the slides I will give to Dr. Hanisa as well. So you guys can always come back and look at that, and also the video. Yeah, so don't worry about that. So basically coming back, okay, I just want to relate back to you why bionomics is a very interesting subject in terms also of the economy. Okay. So if you look at agriculture, agriculture is the largest contributor of any resource sector to the economy. And that's true because it is related directly to the food. Okay, we have our population. Okay, the basic need is food. Right? So that is why the industry is very, very important. Okay. However, of course, it is also a large generator of waste materials. Yeah, and if we look at agriculture, actually it encompasses a lot of different things. Yeah, because it can be farming, you know, palm oil, paddy, things like pepper, right? And that is the direct, you know, relationship with agriculture. But actually, you know, farming can also be other than for food. Okay, it can also be used for biofuels, it's used for pharmaceuticals, right? And this is where the debate about, you know, I don't know if you've heard about this one, food versus fuel. Yeah, have you ever heard about this one? Okay, I see people nodding.
No, sorry, teacher, doctor, we don't know.
Okay, okay, don't worry. So food versus fuel is related to this actually. So when we have, you know, that we have the population of the world is increasing, okay, and there are only so much land you can use for agriculture, okay, but at the same time, things like fuel, biofuel. So biofuel usually uses, you know, the source comes from either agriculture, you know, or agricultural waste. Okay? With waste, it's not so bad, but it becomes a problem when the land is used to cultivate, what do they call it, energy crops. Okay, so I'll just put it there. Energy crops. So if you can look that up later on, energy crops are actually things like, you know, switchgrass, we have jatropha. Okay, from there you can actually, the industry can actually use that crop, okay, to produce things like biodiesel, okay, bioethanol, right? And that is one thing, okay, because the plantation of energy crop uses the land which are also used for food production. Okay, it competes on the same land. So people are starting to ask, like, why would you choose to plant energy crops when you know people like in Africa, for example, are, you know, battling hunger? Okay, what is your justification of doing energy crops? That is one of the arguments, right? And another thing is in Brazil. Okay, Brazil is the world's largest sugarcane producer, but it's also the largest producer of bioethanol. Okay, Brazil, bioethanol. Okay, because actually Brazil, they produce the bioethanol from the sugar. Okay, so that comes back to this debate again. Food versus fuel. Why do they use sugar, which is, you know, food, and produce biofuel rather than, you know, keeping that as food and then market that out? Okay, so I'm saying this to highlight the issue, but of course, there are many reasons for bioenergy as well. Okay, why people are going to biofuels. Okay, and it's basically related to climate change as well, because the current production of fuels, the petroleum, the fossil fuels are one of the major contributor to GHG. Okay, and that creates the need for the world to look into an alternative source of fuel rather than the petroleum fuel. Okay, so that is some of the, what are the issues out there that relates to all of these things, right? And if we're talking about bionomics, right, in terms of the economy, we are actually looking at, how you should answer all of these arguments. Okay, how economies should look like, right, to answer this question, like food versus fuel, which one would you prioritize? Okay, there must be a way where, based on the environment, okay, if we just look at the country itself, if we just zoom in into Malaysia, okay, what are the environment around our population, okay, that we should look at? So if we are looking, if our aim, okay, just try to imagine this from what I talked about before with the microorganism. Okay, what is the aim? Are you aiming for more population or more biomass, or are you aiming for more products? And from there, you can actually, the economy, okay, can actually be changed in such a way that it can accommodate which of those, right? So don't worry, that is just to share. Okay, that won't be in your exam, I think. The economy part is actually out of your scope. Okay, but for me, usually in my classes, I always like to relate things that are outside of your usual scope of education. Okay, we sometimes we are science-based. Okay, but at the end of the day, there are other things out there that should be just as important. Okay, things like social sciences, okay, things like economy, things like investment, those are the things that are around you, okay, and you should be, you should open up and try and look at that as well, right? So I will just skip that one, okay, but this is basically talking about what are the major economic activity in Malaysia. Okay, and we can see from the oil palm is actually one it's very big industry, right? Okay, so usually when we talk about agriculture, okay, there's also the element of waste. I hope you still remember just now when I say the production of agriculture. Okay, it also relates to waste because a lot waste are produced actually, okay, from agro waste. And the way we think about that is if you just look at that as waste, it's a loss, then that's it. But actually you can use the waste. You can use the waste for so many different things. It creates the potential there. Okay, and you guys as, people, yeah, in the industrial. So can you guys remind me again, what is your program? Your degree is in what?
Bachelor Science Bioindustry.
Right,
Sem 1.
Science and bioindustry. So you guys are, should look at this as well. Okay, how you can utilize what are the potential things, okay, that comes from existing practices. Okay, we know that definitely agriculture is there, okay, but how can we change, okay, or how can we change specific practices so that it becomes something useful, it becomes something that can give back to the society, right? So, for example, one of the in thing right now is circular economy, right? So in circular economy, it's basically you are using, okay, let's have that. So if we're talking about the agriculture in specific, okay, in terms of the waste, actually, the waste can be used for so many things. Imagine in palm oil industry, okay, and palm oil, oil palm plantations, you have a lot of waste there. Of course, from the mills, you have pome, which is the palm oil mill effluent. But apart from that, in the plantations itself, you have things like palm fronds, you have things like EFB, the empty fruit bunches. Okay, all of this, if you think about what I mentioned before with bacteria, okay, bacteria are, it must have carbon source. Okay? And actually, the agricultural waste contains so many different carbon sources. That's the value there. Okay? You can use your bacteria to produce so many different things. Can, of course, here highlighted biofuels and chemicals, but at the same time, there are different things as well. Maybe some things are more high value than others, which depends on what type of microorganism you are using. But the point here is that the waste there is a treasure trove. So waste is money. Okay. So from there, you should look into circular economy, right? How you can utilize the waste, right? Use the waste to produce something else, right? And eventually, what it is that one waste from one industry becomes the feed or becomes the source for another industry. Okay, and that goes on and on and on until we come up with something where all waste are actually utilized. We don't actually emit our waste to the environment. Okay, I don't know if you know, but landfills, okay, in Malaysia are full. Okay, there's no more space actually for us to throw our rubbish, okay, in truth, because of course the limitations of land, etc. But how are people going about this? Okay, how are you going to, that's the problem there, but there's also the potential. Okay, how are you going to change the situation? And that's where circular economy comes into, it has its role, yeah, becomes more prominent. Right? So in biomass application, biomass here can be, of course, your bacteria, but at the same time, it can be the agricultural waste. Okay? And it can be applied into so many different things. It can be energy, biodegradables, structural materials, compost. This is just some of the examples. Yeah, there's so many more. Right? For example, here I listed out some of the recovery potential for agricultural waste. Yeah, and this is it's not limited to this actually. There's so many potential out there. It's such a dynamic field, In biotechnology, I always it's one of the things that makes me happy when I go, look into the various research, various findings, because you see the potential. right? So I think before we finish up, okay, just a quick one. Again, if you have things like this is a potential, sorry for that. This is actually a potential way of when you have an agriculture system. So one of the things is perhaps you have a farm, okay, animal, cows, pigs, chicken. Okay, that farm actually produces animal waste. Okay, and animal waste can go into biogas digester. Okay, this is actually an anaerobic digester if you are interested. And in biogas digester, actually it produces biogas. Okay, from the waste here, it produces biogas, and that biogas can become fuel. Okay, that's one thing. It can be sold off as fuel, or it can be used in generators. Okay, similar like when you go to Pasar Malam, you have that generator, the very noisy one. So actually you have the fuel there. Okay, it's actually using that, and you can generate electricity from there. Okay. And of course, heat. Okay, heat is also something very important in the industry. Okay. And then you see the waste being used as that. Right? And at the same time, the AD here, it not only produces biogas, it produces the digestate. We call it digestate. Okay, and digestate here actually has a high level of nutrients. It has high NNP, and it can actually go into, okay, one of the example here is of course microalgae, but another example is just the plantations. Okay, or if you have a vegetable farm, you can actually use that as fertilizer, right? And then, of course, if you have microalgae here, microalgae can be used to produce oil. Okay, it's similar to the biodiesel. Okay, but basically from there you can get oil, okay, and you get biodiesel, and the rest of the algae is used as animal feed. So it can be fish, it can also be like, again here, animals, cows, pigs, chickens, but they can actually use the microalgae, right? And, you know, this creates the circularity. Okay, you see there, the waste from here becomes the source there, you know, and it creates this is the aim, or rather the what we really envision for circular economy. It's something like this, right? You make use of all that is within that specific production, okay? And you make use of all the waste, and you can actually get a lot of you know, products there. You get money. That's how it is, right? So we arrive finally at the conclusion. Right? So I hope you guys had, you know, you can get the gist of what today's lecture is all about. Okay, it's about bionomics, right? And how you can actually relate biomass production, okay, with its environment. That is the underlying thing about bionomics, right? However, we also have to think about what are the limitations and what are the challenges. Like we think about, you know, innovation. It always comes from, you know, what are the specific problems that you want to solve. Okay, that drives innovation actually. Okay, whatever that you want to do, of course, you must have the knowledge first, which is why you are here. Okay, but you have to make use of that knowledge for the future. Okay, I always tell my student, whatever that you learn. It doesn't matter if you are in bioindustry or you are biotechnologists, or my students are environmental science students, yeah. And it can also be things like economy. It can be people in the finance. Whatever you learn, you must use in the future. It will become useful in one way or another. Right? So always keep an open mind. Read news. Yeah, now it's so easy to get news. And don't always go for gossips lah. Just look at the world news, look at the Malaysian news. Okay, how many of you had followed COP26, for example? COP26 is one of the world event last week. Okay, and there's so many things in there which we will see the effect in the next 5 years, for example. Okay, there are things there. If you are someone who are interested in investment, okay, you have to keep track, of what is happening around you. Then you can actually make informed decision. Okay, when you want to invest, when you want to sell, so on and so forth. So it doesn't matter what is your background, okay, or what is your current degree, okay, what is the final degree that you will get. Always think about the future, what you will make use of. Right, so I hope you guys, are okay today. Yeah, and thank you so much for listening. Thank you for staying on.